All right, Mr. Morales, what is the most important issue facing the district attorney's office right now?
Well, I think the most important issue facing the DA's office is the issue facing our community right now is the rising DWI rates. Every year, the rates go up and up. Recidivism rates go up, especially recidivism rates. And this is what's of primary concern to me in this race is the increase in repeat DWIs and repeat DWI offenders. And I have a lot of experience in this area as a criminal defense attorney. I represent a lot of these people. I put them back on the street. If you were to walk into my office today and tell me you had a DWI, I only need to ask you 3 questions, and I know exactly what's going to happen to you. And that can't possibly be the right answer with all the varied facts and circumstances that we have in these kinds of cases. But Mr. Esparza's record is pretty set. Over the last 20 years, his policy and how he deals with these things has not changed one bit. In the 13 years I've been practicing as a criminal defense attorney, it's not changed one bit. The difference between a DWI first and a second DWI, the only difference is whether you're going to spend 12 months on probation or 18 months on probation. That can't be the right answer. We have to do something different.
One of the questions that keeps coming up, and probably will until this election is over, is the Villegas case. Your opponent tonight raised the issue of your contributions. And tonight you said on day one you would dismiss that case.
Right.
She kind of implied that, because you get big financial contributions from the person who's bankrolling his defense, that there's some sort of connection. How do you respond to that?
Well, I mean, there's many considerations that go into this, okay? But understand the Villegas case is one case. I have a lot of other issues that I think need to be addressed along with the Villegas case. But to suggest that somehow I'm being bought to dismiss the Villegas case kind of ignores the facts. We've seen, again, 2 jury trials, a 2-week-long evidentiary hearing that was covered in the news ad nauseum. I sat through about 10 days of those 14 days. As a student of criminal justice, you kind of have to watch that case. I'm looking for the evidence. I sat through the suppression hearing that occurred in front of Judge Medrano about Danny Villegas' confession. I'm not a passing observer in this. As a defense attorney, it's my responsibility to keep an eye on these kinds of things. I'm not talking out of turn. I'm talking from the knowledge that I have of the evidence. I know exactly what sorts of evidence Mr. Esparza is talking about in these supposed jail phone calls. He's told others that he also has people that have confessed to, that Daniel Villegas supposedly confessed to them. Well, you're talking about a jail snitch, and you're talking about a relative who doesn't exactly say what Mr. Esparza thinks he's going to say. So when Mr. Esparza says that he's tried this case and it's come back solely because Mr. Villegas had a bad lawyer, well, that's not entirely true. If you actually read the Court of Appeals opinion, you'll find that the Court of Appeals commented on a lot of other parts of the Villegas case, things that were problematic about it.
So what the district attorney said today was inaccurate, because the way that he had framed it was turned over because of bad representation, and that there wasn't any finding of guilt or innocence, right. That it was turned over because of bad representation.
Well, you need more than just bad representation. In order to get the Court of Appeals, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, one of the most conservative appellate courts in the country, to go your way, you don't just have to have a bad lawyer. I mean, this is the same court that said a lawyer that's asleep through a trial is okay. You have to have bad representation and bad evidence. So there's a lot more going on than Mr. Esparza really wants to let on. This is about his ego. It's about his legacy. It's not about doing justice.
And one of the things that your opponent, Ms. Rosales, had indicated was, look, 1/3 of your campaign contributions came from Mr. Wimbella. So can you equivocally say that will not have an impact on your decision to either prosecute or not prosecute the case?
Well, the decisions that I've made are mine alone. I've looked at this case since before I even considered running for district attorney. I mean, this thing has been around since 2013 it came back. And as I suggested before, we've talked about this case before. I've talked about it with Jaime Olivas, the man that actually tried the case the first time. We've discussed it at length. In actuality, that decision, my viewpoint on that case, comes far beyond and far before my decision to run for district attorney. I made that decision long ago on my particular opinion about the case. And unless there is some earth-shattering revelation in evidence, actual evidence, why are we doing this?
Isn't that what your opponent, though, the district attorney, is arguing, that there is I believe he said a tape recording from a jail phone call?
Here's my problem. You have no physical evidence at all tying Danny Villegas to the crime. You have no real evidence tying him to the crime. You really had no corroborative evidence at all to tie him to the crime. Mm-hmm. The only thing you had was an illegally coerced confession. And here he's trying to cobble together a case based on some jail phone calls that may or may not have said what? Did Danny Villegas come out and tell his mom, you know what, Mom, I actually did this, I'm sorry? No, there's nothing like that. Mm-hmm. We're talking about subtlety and nuance, and is that enough to justify a capital murder conviction? Mm-hmm. That's what I'm going to ask for. I'm going to ask for evidence. Great, you got a confession. Now show me what the evidence is.
Okay. What distinguishes you most between you and your opponent?
Well, I think I brought it up tonight. Is the experience gap? Okay, and it's true. You know, Ms. Rosales is a good lawyer. I'm not going to discount that. She's a good lawyer. She's a thoughtful person, but she simply doesn't have the kind of experience that I think is necessary before you can even put yourself out there as a district attorney candidate. Having tried multiple capital murder cases, I've done this. I'm qualified and certified to deal with capital murder cases involving the death penalty. There's only 12 lawyers in this city that are qualified to do those cases. She's not one of them. And you have to decide, make those kinds of decisions. There's no substitute for having been in the courtroom, dealing with the evidence. You don't just wake up and know how to try a case. I think that's disingenuous as well, to say as a lawyer that I walk out of law school and I can try a capital murder case. Absolutely not. You have no business being in that courtroom. So the other angle about that is, well, what is the district attorney exactly? Is it administrator or are you a trial lawyer? Well, we have an administrator now, and this is the problem with the office. They lack leadership, they lack direction, they lack proper training. This is the problem that they have. They have an administrator. They don't need another administrator. They need a leader. They need somebody that has the credibility and the experience to train them properly, to know what evidence looks like, to be able to try a serious case, to be able to present a compelling case, even in something as simple as a DWI. The reason that Mr. Esparza doesn't like trying DWI cases is because his office doesn't know how to present a compelling case. And that's the main problem, because the main job of the DA is to present cases in court, to prosecute crimes committed against this community, not just to shuffle paper.
What is your biggest critique of the incumbent?
My biggest critique of Mr. Esparza is in various areas. One, again, is leadership. He's too far detached from anything that occurs in his office. I have tried many cases in that courthouse. I have never once seen Mr. Esparza stick his head in just to see how it's going on, just to see how it is. And we're talking about serious cases, murder cases. I keep saying capital murder cases, but these are serious cases. You know, not too long ago, I dealt with the murder case on Pony Trail, the ice informant murder. Not once did I ever see Mr. Esparza poke his head in during all of that case and all of that mess. One of the most significant cases that's come across the courts in El Paso in the last decade, I think. The only real example of violence spilling over from Mexico to the U.S. And Mr. Esparza didn't walk in one time during any of those hearings. I think that speaks volumes about him. Additionally, I think that we need to really reevaluate how we're operating this office. He has 90 lawyers in that office, nearly 100 support staff, a budget of anywhere between $15 to $20 million a year coming from various locations. And yet, we have a huge backlog. How is that possible? There aren't that many criminal courts in El Paso. So how is it possible?
So he's been asked that question in debates before, and he's basically put it on the judges and saying, look, I don't run the dockets, it's the judges. That's the reason there's a backlog. So he kind of throws the judges under the bus.
Right.
What is your response to that?
Well, it's not just the judges. There's a combination of factors at work. One of those has to do with us. the criminal defense attorneys. You know, sometimes, yeah, we'll dig our heels in and not enter a plea. If I feel strongly about a case, I'll counsel my client appropriately, and maybe we have to have a trial. But that doesn't happen a lot. What you have most of the time is you have the district attorney that digs in their heels, says this is the recommendation you're going to get, this is all you're going to get. So your only choice is to capitulate or go to trial. The judges have nothing to do with that process. Understand, plea negotiations doesn't have anything to do with the DA's office. That's between the DA and the defense attorney. And what I can tell you right now is that they refuse to look at alternate dispositions. They refuse to look at different ways of handling different kinds of cases, especially the lesser minor offenses. For example, simple possessions of marijuana under 2 ounces, small possession cases. These kids, these young people are getting booked daily on these things, dragged into court to be dealt with in court. Is that always necessary? Is it always necessary that they have to have some kind of probation before we do something, before we do anything different? I mean, we're ruining people's lives here for simple mistakes, youthful indiscretions. I want to do things differently. I want to see fewer convictions and more justice being done, more good works being done, not handicapping our community, our young people, before they even really get started.
So my final question is, you know, what do you say to an undecided voter who might be watching this? What's your pitch to them?
Well, as for an undecided voter, I think you have to consider the choice that you have to make. If you vote for Mr. Esparza, nothing will change. If you want something different, if you want to come into the 21st century, if you want to see and vote for someone that can actually accomplish the things that he's promising, then I'm the only other candidate that can do that. Ms. Rosales simply doesn't have the experience, the knowledge, the credibility to follow through with the promises that she's making, because she simply has never handled these kinds of things. Now, I have the experience, the competence, and the credibility to bring those people into the 21st century, to lead them and not be dealing with cases and things with a 1982, 1992 attitude about things. Crime reform is on the move. From Washington spilling outwards, we're finding different ways to deal with things. Mr. Esparza is stuck in the past. He refuses to look to the future. His idea of innovation is putting up a billboard with a sexy nurse on it. That doesn't do anything. We need to find real solutions to these real problems. And that's what I want to do. I want to find real solutions to real problems and not prosecute cases because I can, but prosecute cases because we should.